People that dislike themselves but don't anymore. How'd you manage that? Story 1. I realized that I was setting a double standard, a harsh one for myself and a lenient one for others. This always caused me to see myself beneath others, and it gave me low self-esteem. When I decided to give myself the same compassion and fairness that I give other people, things started getting better for me. Answer: this also worked for me. I realized that I often cut people slack on a lot of things, but never did the same for myself. Anytime I'd start a new job, for instance, I'd be unfairly harsh to myself and beat myself up for not being perfect immediately. I'd never do that to someone else. We all need to learn and gain experience to improve. The second thing I did was figure out that if I can have a negative thought process about me, then logically, I could also have a positive thought. It sounds simple, but it took me a while. Story 2. It wasn't helping. It felt like hating myself was the only fair judgment, and I had to be honest in order to then improve. Turns out I could only improve if I stopped holding such a low opinion of myself in the first place. Seemed backwards at the time, but years down the road, I look back at hating myself as an inefficient and chemically driven thought process. Story 3. I moved away from my old place and cut off contact with everyone who could still remember the old me. Before, it always felt like it's pointless trying to work on myself because everyone would still see and judge me by my past self. Their idea of me will never be updated no matter what I do, and I will always feel the pressure to perform down to their expectations of me. Now I get to control the narrative of my life and self with all the new people I meet. Story 4. I wrote down a list of everything I dislike about myself right next to a list of everything I liked about myself. The contrast was long. Then I took action. For anything physical, I scheduled appointments. Haircut, dermatologist, gym, etc. For anything related to mindset, I changed my vocabulary. Chores, home art project, run errands, go on adventure. I should have to do, I get to do, and purposely started looking for positive things in every location. Nice curtains, good food smell, neat music. Whatever I could possibly find that was positive. If I ever thought something judgmental, I literally told myself, stop, and forced myself to say or think something kind instead. For anything social, I started looking ahead. I got a calendar and texted friends to set up hangouts. I looked up concerts or events and put them in my calendar. I gave myself and my husband a travel goal for a 10-year time span and started planning out how to make that happen financially and with work. I put friend and family birthdays or anniversaries into calendars, so there's always something to reach out to them about. Started alternating which days I would call people on my commute to keep in touch. It took a few years of consistency, but now I can say that I'm proud of who I am. I'm generally happy every day. Anytime someone lightheartedly says, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya," I always say, "Well, I like me, Sue okay," in a sing-song voice right back, and I actually mean it. To quote Snoop, I want to thank me for believing in me. Story 5. I'm not saying I recommend this to others, but I had a really positive experience with psychedelic mushrooms in terms of my self-esteem and negative self-talk. I had set an intention to inwardly explore this topic, which I think was helpful. During my experience, my sense of self really broke down. It was kind of like a council of myselves were meeting to talk about the current state of things. During this time, I was fascinated to discover how there was only really one part of me that disliked myself. He was just the thin, loudest part. I was also able to hear this part explain what his issues truly were, and the other parts were better able to challenge my unhelpful, unproductive thinking. In other words, I felt like I was able to talk to myself, utilize tools from therapy, without my normal and negative thought patterns getting in the way, and I could conceptualize myself differently, which was helpful. Story 6. I realized I was a better friend and person when I treated myself like I treated others. It made me realize that in liking or loving myself, I was able to love others that much more and be a better friend partner to others, which created a positive feedback loop for increased self-esteem. Story 7. Always a work in progress. Losing weight has reduced the self-hatred a lot, though. Regaining control of my eating habits overall had a positive effect. I also give myself more grace. Mistakes happen, and I'm only human. Story 8. I still dislike myself, but much less than I used to. I overcame my self-hatred in regards to my appearance by changing my appearance. I overcame my self-hatred in regards to my sexuality by surrounding myself with intimacy, positive people who have similar preferences. I'm still working on overcoming my self-hatred in regards to my personality and behavior. One part I'm working on is changing my personality and behavior. Another part I'm working on is not holding myself to impossible standards and being kinder to myself. Story 9. I quit all my bad habits and started living a healthier lifestyle, both mentally and physically. I focused on improving myself step by step. It wasn't instant, but the more I committed to becoming better, the less I disliked the person I used to be. Story 10. Acceptance. Accepting and appreciating to an extent my flaws. Knowing I'm only human and have good intentions. By no means does this mean I'm always 100% happy with myself, and I get frustrated with some quirks of my personality, but acceptance has helped enormously. Story 11. I learned myself like I love others. If I would do it for a friend, I should be able to do it for myself. Now I am religious, and one of the key verses in the Bible is, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Now, most people see it as, treat others as you would have them treat you, which is not wrong, but doesn't grasp what loving someone is. It's not just treating them well, but thinking and wishing wellness for them. Now, the key part is the as yourself. You should be loving yourself so you can love others better. Story 12. Journaling and exploring on my own were the things that helped me fall in love with myself, if I'm being honest. During that time, I could really sit with myself and see who I really was outside of people. Story 13. Advice from my therapist. You wouldn't be upset with yourself if you didn't think you could be better, which is to say, self-hatred is an indication that you're capable of being better. Use that as motivation rather than depression. A big point of self-hatred, at least for me, was comparing myself to others. Learning to develop a growth mindset where the only person you're competing against is yourself is a path out of that dark place. Story 14. Realized that I disliked how I thought others perceive me rather than how I genuinely perceive myself. I've always considered some of my personality traits, beliefs, interests objectively undesirable and unappealing, but I never felt the urge or need to change them, despite craving validation and wanting to fit in. I am the way I am for a reason, and pretending I'm somebody else is very exhausting. I eventually realized that I'm not necessarily disappointed in myself, and I'm actually quite proud of my beliefs, actions, habits, etc. Just because others cannot see value in you doesn't mean you're worthless. Story 15. I'm all I've got, really. Even in my marriage or relationships, it's me and myself in the end. So why would I dislike the person who is looking out for me the most? It's been a long time coming, and it's a constant healing process, but it's my most important relationship. Story 16. I realized my self-worth. Took an OD attempt, 16 years of maternal brainwashing and several scars, but it definitely spun some gears in my head that isn't how I wanted to feel, and that was not how my dad and I raised me to be. I couldn't do better for myself or my sibling, whom I raised until the day I walked out, if I was dead. And I certainly couldn't leave him alone at the hands of our mother. Story 17. This is a tough one. I healed about past trauma and insecurities. It wasn't about getting better, it was more managing those thoughts. Then I got older and acquired new traumas and insecurities. I think I need a new management style. Story 18. I've always kept high standards of myself, but there were far many times when laziness, selfishness, stupidity, or poor integrity on my part lead to falling short of those standards. I became real harsh on myself. My boss used to say no one can be as hard on me as I am. One day I had enough of myself. It took a lot of work. I still keep those high standards but am less harsh and am proud of the man I see in the mirror. Story 19. I realized that I am the only person I can count on, so I made changes to make sure I truly can count on myself, and in the process fixed or at least accepted most of the things I dislike about myself. My mantra: good things happen by chance, bad things happen by chance. Good things happen when I make them happen. I also let go of the idea that I should be happy or comfortable all the time. And I let go of the idea that I'm a good person, not so much because I wanted to do bad things, but because it was giving me a sense of entitlement that the real world would never live up to. Story 20. Reached out to a therapist who taught me to challenge my thoughts, and reached out to a friend who saved me from depression, and was there for me, grew in self-love and rewired my brain. Your thoughts are under your control and they affect your whole system. Take responsibility for them and you'll discover liberation. Story 21. Came to realize that the people I idolized growing up all had issues as well. My uncle fought in Vietnam but had a temper and drank too much. My dad was a very successful engineer at GM, but interacted poorly with people a lot and was very secluded personally. The musicians and actors all had various problems. We all make mistakes and have things to work on. I'm not doing anything deplorable. I was just a shy nerd. Hating yourself doesn't solve anything. It's easy to do, and being a critic of yourself is a good thing. Just expecting perfection is too far. My friends sat me down a few times to tell me they loved me for who I was, and I needed to give myself a break. We're only human. Story 22. I realized that I had an undiagnosed illness that affected my cognitive function, mood, and memory. I was so hard on myself for feeling dumb, not getting people's jokes, not understanding what my peers would ask of me, and be anxious about it all of the time. I'm a lot better now and can think clearly again for the most part. It's still not perfect, but it's easier to give myself a little bit of empathy to know it's out of my control. Story 23. Honestly, staring in the mirror on shrooms would definitely not recommend for anyone without knowing their situation, but it worked for me. Something just clicked, and I saw myself from an external perspective and was like, darn, I wonder why I give this guy such a hard time. This was nearly half a decade ago, and it still stuck. Obviously, I still have self-esteem trouble from time to time, but no self-loathing or dislike, just a lack of confidence from time to time. Story 24. Opposite of what some people on here are saying. I never used to hold myself to high enough standards. I lacked discipline but called it a lack of motivation. I was lazy but said I was tired. One divorce and a lot of self-reflection later, and I am 10x the man I used to be. Story 25. Hit rock bottom. Realized I was losing everything important to myself and I could either drown myself in addiction or fight. I decided to fight. I hit the gym 5 days a week, worked on my diet, lost $100, unpacked my trauma, and identified patterns in my life that I was making worse. Identified my triggers and my toxic behavior. Practiced mindfulness and did a lot of research. It's been 2 years now into my journey, and now I would say I am realized. I am proud of who I am and that I got where I am with my own strength. I love me, and because of that, I can more fully love those around me. Story 26. I worked on becoming someone I wanted to be around, since, I'm always around myself. Also helps if you think of yourself as a friend. Have some grace with yourself like you would your friends. Story 27. I had kids. After being my son and daughter's superhero for years, I started to realize I'm not such a bad old bag of bones. That wasn't the end, though. I had a lot of forgiveness to spread out to a lot of people, including my younger self. That guy was a male body part. I, however, occasionally partake in dickish behavior, but will supervised by my adult self. Story 28. Therapy was the ultimate help, but the things I learned from it before I stopped having sessions are what I've carried forward and remember day to day now. The things I disliked about myself, my mistakes and bad habits, which contributed towards that self-hatred, were never going to improve if I just sat there and scolded myself for each and every one of them. Learning to forgive myself for my mistakes and be content with my own conscience was like exiting a long and dark tunnel. It's very hard to put into words, but the hatred essentially just creates a cycle. Compassion, on the other hand, allows you to understand yourself better. I found with self-loathing, I wasn't introspecting or asking why, but just condemning myself for things I disliked. But when I forgave myself for making mistakes, I began to ask why I made them, why I was doing things I didn't approve of. I still have less than desirable habits, but I find that overall I genuinely love myself as a person now. Story 29. I kept trying to achieve things I was not capable of. I had to admit to myself, and that really helped. Once I started setting goals that were achievable, that also completed the transitioning. The false hope of telling kids that they can do anything isn't fair to them. As parents, we need to understand that not every kid is going to solve the hurdle of developing light-speed travel. Reality is a meanie. Don't tell them they can't do something, but to teach them that failure is a part of life and to learn from it. Don't let it define you. Story 30. I began reading a lot on sociology, psychology, and history and came to realize that everyone's a way bigger Pios than I am. Now I feel good about my awareness of the absolute sandwich I inherited from a bunch of sociopathic, dogmatic, ignorant buffoons who thought they were all that and a bag of chips, and am now spending my entire career and life cleaning up the messes of all those before me. Story 31. Accepted the fact that I have flaws and am a constant work in progress. Oddly enough, I think my acceptance of passing really helped me realize that I shouldn't be so hard on myself, and especially not others. Story 32. Realizing that everybody is terrible, just that some people are less terrible than others. I try not to be a shoot person, but it seems like people want to go out of their way to be awful to each other these days. Story 33. This side of the nut house, I learned a lot about the people in my life that deeply cared about me. Finally clicked that, if they love me, I should too. Because after all, we can't fully and truly love those we hold dear if we don't first love ourselves. The medication also didn't hurt, LOL. Story 34. A little bit of therapy helped, but really it was just me deciding to act in public like I was well-liked and respected. I didn't believe it, of course, but there's truth to faking it until you make it. After a while, it stops being an act and you settle into a much more balanced perspective of yourself. You might even develop something of an ego. I also gave myself undeniable examples of why I don't deserve to be disliked, by making people laugh, by being kind and sensitive, etc. There's more to it than that, and what works for me may not work for you, but it's worth a shot. Story 35. Ketamine therapy, EMDR for trauma recovery, years of counseling, unlearning the bad things I learned in childhood, leaving the church, evangelical South. Wishing you the best. Hating yourself is no fun. There is hope, though. Story 36. I dislike myself because I felt that I wasn't good enough or just generally had low self-esteem. But as I grew older, I learned to just not care and realized that some of the things I do are better than others. And I just tell myself, I'm just better than people lol. Story 37. It kind of just happened without me realizing it. My crush, who always made me happy, would talk to me often and like he was very understanding, forgiving, etc. I just felt like, I know he loves me, so I shall love myself too. Because if the kindest person I've ever met can love me, then I must not be that bad. It took time to eventually be able to do it, but it's not supposed to be a quick thing. Rushing stuff is no good. I say that a lot to my friends. AKA, I met someone I truly loved and it made me change. Story 38. A lot of circular logic in my 20s and 30s where, due to a lot of friends I'd seen eliminate during the war, I didn't believe I was worthy to still be living, or that I wasn't living a life worthy of their sacrifices. It caused me to dislike myself bitterly. I'd get down on myself, consider myself a piece of shit and undeserving of happiness. And then I would sabotage good things in my life, usually being unfaithful to significant others. It took therapy and me realizing that I don't owe the dead anything, that I am an imperfect person in an imperfect world, give myself some grace, and that I deserve to be happy and have good things. Story 39. I started eating better food. I started sleeping earlier. I started working out. I left a job I dislike. I worked extremely hard to build a new career. I stopped going on second dates unless it was a fudge yes, and I had a sense it was for them as well. Eventually, I looked in the mirror and was grateful to the person in it. Since light travels at speed and not instantly, that person is in the past, for the place I found myself in. How could I dislike a person I viewed with gratitude? Story 40. Lifelong journey. But honestly, find something and become really good at it. A skill or hobby that you can be proud of and that others can also respect. The more you level up, the more confident you become, the less pathetic or dumb you feel. Apply those skills, set and hit those life goals, and just work towards it. If there are qualities about yourself you don't like, work on them. If it's jealousy or being too sensitive or lashing out with anger and emotion or being too controlling or anxious, all these things can be offset and reduced. Good luck out there and be kind to yourself, everyone. Figures out life at a different pace. Story 41. I thought about the people who made me dislike myself and realized they really weren't great people. So why did I give them the power to hurt me? I thought about the advice I'd give to someone else if they were dealing with the people I dealt with. If I can give that kindness to a stranger, why can't I also give it to myself? I'm working on getting myself to a place of true self-love now, because I deserve it. We all deserve to love ourselves. I'd never talk about others the way I talk about myself, unless they were actually bad people, LOL. So now it's time for me to receive the love and kindness I give so easily to others. Story 42. I dumped my POS BF and made a resolution to change the things I didn't like about myself. First thing I started with was my teeth. Had always been crooked and a huge insecurity. And trying out new hobbies. Always thought I was boring and had zero talent at anything. Met my current partner in one of those hobbies about a year ago, and life just continues getting better. Trying out new hobbies was probably the most impactful overall. Story 43. I convinced myself that I'm awesome. Once I did that, it was easy to convince others, which boosted my confidence. That made me more awesome, people noticed, confidence boosted. And on it looped. Story 44. Ketamine and cognitive behavioral therapy. I realized recently I only dislike the part of myself that wasn't aligning with my authentic self. I was living for my father and society and subconsciously embodied their values as my own. I'm free from that now and struggling to find a reason to dislike myself. Story 45. At 45, I just try and say fudge it. Who cares? I really try on a daily basis not to be so hard on myself, and I take a look at myself on a weekly basis to see if I can change in any way. I still catch myself saying that I dislike myself occasionally. It's more subconsciously, and it's really hard to stop. But it's getting better the older I get. Confidence is something that is hard to achieve and harder to keep. Story 46. Therapy helped me see the many reasons I felt this way were unfounded and often factually untrue. And then I turned the blame and dislike on those who deserve it, not myself. I took steps to remove my birth family completely from my life. I'm still learning. I still hear the voices and see the memories that made me feel like shoot, but I can much more easily handle them. I try to only surround myself with people who like me and want me around. Story 47. Start doing stuff you like. I went like $3,000 into debt taking a trip I couldn't afford and buying nice clothes and some supplies I always said I didn't need for a hobby I enjoy. Gave me some appreciation for life and for pursuit of doing things. It made life easier having some things to work towards, which ultimately made me a nicer person to be around. I ended up developing a bit of drinking problem from enjoying myself a bit too much, but I fixed that too. Do some stuff that makes you happy. Even if you can't afford it right now or it's not a good time, it's better than wasting your life. One day, you'll be old and look back on this time and realize what a bum you were and you should have acted sooner. Story 48. Perspective change in life. Identified what you dislike about yourself and why. Change what you can and own it, while let it go if not under your control. Also have sympathy and compassion for yourself. You are not perfect and it is okay. No one is. Story 49. Few different ways. 1. I got older and stopped caring about small things I cannot change. 2. I got a good, healthy relationship with someone who loves me for who I am. 3. I began working on, after psychologist consultations, on the things that I can change, such as my outlook on myself, the world, and other people. Story 50. I started by accepting I wasn't perfect. That was a stepping stone, though. I had to accept I was trans and that it was something I couldn't ever reject if I ever wanted to actually love myself. Tried for a decade to push that down and dislike myself for it, but nothing ever removes that part of me and I had to accept it instead. You can't work against yourself, you got to work with yourself. Story 51. I still dislike myself sometimes, but there are a few things I had to realize. I felt that I need to emphasize my relationships with all the people in my life, to at least call the people I care about, so they know that I care. I know lots of people, but I always feel bad, because mental stuff causes me to go years without calling very close friends. This way, I can have a stronger relationship with others in my life, but I was slightly off the mark. I realized there was one relationship in my life that I was lacking hard on, someone that needed attention badly and was getting none. He was feeling lonely and needed severe quality time. To be honest, I barely even knew who he was. That person was myself. I need to take care of myself because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many people I know, I still have to live with myself. Taking care of yourself looks like this: showering, feeding yourself, taking yourself outside, doing new things, cleaning your space. It's simple, but as someone who has lost his sense of self, it's a start. The next thing that you need to realize is that clean things have value. If I clean my car, if I clean myself, if I clean my room, that means that I value these things, so I'm going to put effort into these things to make them look nice. For me, this increases my mood, and I have a better sense of self. There are still a lot more lessons to learn, but that's life. It's full of lessons, and I don't know anything, so how can I be mad at myself for something I didn't know? Either way, hope this helps. Story 52. When I dislike myself, I actively thought against myself. You're so stupid, you should be smarter. Self-talk like that, about everything. After therapy and introspection and some self-awareness, I've learned to just accept myself, especially my flaws. Now that being said, it's very difficult to do. I'll never be a superhero. Sometimes I do the wrong things, even when I know they're wrong, etc. And it's okay. I'm not a bad person. Story 53. My therapist was kind enough to point out that, in my view, everything bad that happens is my fault, and everything good is the fault of those around me. I'm still not 100 there, but I'm slowly learning not to judge myself constantly. Understanding where this mentality originated has been helpful for me to put it all into perspective. Story 54. I meditated on why I dislike myself and was so harsh about aspects of my personality. Journaled my thoughts out after processing things, and began to shift towards behaving like the person I'd like to be. Along the way, I came to appreciate aspects of myself I used to dislike and found a healthy middle ground. Story 55. I derive my sense of self-fulfillment from being about to perform useful work, so I found something I was good at and didn't let go. Also, I stopped sabotaging myself by smoking pot all the fudge time. Story 56. The thing that pulled me out of it was realizing that my past self didn't need my help anymore. My future self did. No amount of actions or thoughts or feelings would help the past me that got hurt. But what I could do is pour that energy into helping my future self. That's what kept me going, and it's treated me well. Story 57. I found Jesus and learned that my value and worth is completely in God and who He says I am, rather than comparing myself to worldly standards and measuring my worth based on the opinions and preferences of other people. Story 58. I never disliked myself, but I strongly disliked everything about myself besides parts of my personality, like kindness. I never liked my looks. I felt ugly, short, weak, not very masculine, incapable, useless, etc. I spent many years pretty isolated and just kept living with those insecurities. But as I got older, I felt like I didn't want to feel that way anymore, so I made some conscious decisions to change a bit. I grew my hair out and tried pretty hard to take care of it. I started growing plants and caring for them, so I had a little bit of a goal to focus on and something to nurture. I got rid of lots of my clothes and started buying new stuff that for me better. I tried getting better at cooking, partially to be able to eat better, but also to save money. I tried getting used to talking more often so I wouldn't be so cripplingly shy. All of these small steps culminated in me feeling a lot better about myself. I am nowhere near loving myself, but I have started seeing my worth and feeling happier about it.